Okay, awesome. So congratulations both teams for making it this far. You should be really proud of yourself for making it all the way to the U16 finals. So congratulations, everyone. So before we begin, let me just allow all of the panelists to introduce themselves. So for that, I'm Jasmine, I'll be your chair. And I guess in the order I can see people on the screen. Anais,
Sure, my name's Anais. I'll be one of your panelists.
and then Michael,
Everyone, my name is Mikey. I'll be a panelist today. Good luck to my teams.
and then Asif.
Hi everyone, I'll be your panel for this finals. Best of luck.
All right, awesome. So, couple of reminders before we begin. Firstly, both teams, could you let me know whether you consent to your speech being recorded? So if anyone does not consent, just to be very clear, maybe you can type it out in chat. I see some thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right, so the teams consent to being recorded. If you can, please keep your cameras on. Before you start speaking, as usual, you can, and there's no compulsion to do so, you can volunteer your preferred pronouns, and I ask everyone to respect that. And before you start speaking, it'll be best if you let the house know what your POI preference is, whether it's chat or voice, and just do a very quick mic check before you start. Please keep time on your own. I will keep time as well, and all of the judges will also keep time, but it's just best if you keep time on your own also. And above all, just make sure that you are being kind and respectful to everyone in the room. So without further ado, let's begin and invite the Honorable Prime Minister.
So am I visible and audible?
Yep.
So good afternoon, everyone. Well, before I start my speech, good afternoon, everyone, and congratulations for the grand finals. And I'll be the Prime Minister for this round, and I use she, they pronouns, and I only take verbal POIs. I will not be looking at the chat throughout my speech. So then starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judge, we think that a lot of anger and a lot of hate exists within society, and nobody should be supporting that humans are incapable of caring for others. We deserve to feel happiness, love, and support. But because of the mass amount of anger and confusion in the status quo, many people don't make the wisest choices. So, i.e., they're not bad people, but they were angry or irrational in that moment in time. So, if they were more peaceful and altruistic, they would have made better choices. For example, if I'm angry because someone said something mean to me, it's more likely that I would punch someone. Rather than if I was feeling empathetic and altruistic at that moment, I would be willing to negotiate and go over it and forgive them. So we are not asking people not to be themselves, and we are asking people to be the best personality of themselves. This is what we support in today's debate. And this is about them and their impacts on other people in society, because we are supporting a world in which people are more altruistic due to these moral enhancement drugs. And we want society to develop in a way that is better for humans. And this is the best way to do it because we have everyone's best interests at heart. So moving on to some definitions, we tell you that this house is a society, and by empathetic, compassionate, and altruistic, we say that we can all do this in the status quo, but we can't be them all the time. So sometimes I'm not altruistic and sometimes I'm very angry. And we tell you that we aren't taking away their autonomy in the sense that we are changing their emotions so that they would think like the person when they're altruistic. So moral enhancement drugs are drugs that help you become more moral and empathetic, altruistic, or compassionate by changing your emotions and allowing you to think rationally. So it's basically switching to the more altruistic version of yourself. And note here that if Annie and I both took the MEDs and we become altruistic version of yourself, we would still be different, so we would still have autonomy, right? For example, you're usually really peaceful and you like negotiations, but for some reason you're extremely aggressive. So when you take this drug, this would be you would turn into your altruistic version of yourself. And as a government, we would give moral enhancement drugs to everybody after safety checks done by a UN body. And we also tell you that we have the fiat to say that this is feasible and that this would already happen. And also by development, we tell you that this will be funded by actors such as the government. And the metric of today's debate should be on who helps society more. And the criteria is A, how we make people more moral, B, how we resolve conflicts, and lastly, how we create a better society at the end of the day. So moving on to our first argument on how we can make people moral so they would care more about moral ideologies and social issues. So number one, first premise on how would this policy actually work. So abiding by the info slide, the MED focuses on selfless principles like compassion, altruism, and empathy, which induces users into having these kinds of states where they think about these kind of things constantly under this medication. So how does this actually work? So you're in an angry state because you have certain circumstances, like you have a conflict with your father because he cannot pay for your university fees. When you take this pill, you understand that they have their own issues and that they simply can't afford them, although they extremely want to. So not only will this create better realization of how multifaceted humans are and create discussion on all of these multifaceted issues, we can also consider social issues from a very objective and moral perspective on what would better society. And by ethical issues, we think that like it would be like something along the lines of, is this right to have all of this money when people are starving to death? The impact of this here is that MEDs will largely lead to less person-to-person conflicts. And then opposition may talk about autonomy here, but we say that we aren't taking away autonomy because we are simply allowing people to make choices in their most rational selves. For example, happy Leanne versus angry Leanne. Happy Leanne would definitely make better choices, but this does not mean that everyone would make the same choice that the government somehow wants them to make. And even if this is not true, we tell you that the ends justify the means, that we are willing to trade off a bit of autonomy for the greater good of society. So therefore, their harms on autonomy are mitigated. And this is probably the strongest thing that they could bring up in today's round, right? Also, moving on to our second argument on how we have a better resolution of conflicts. We tell you that not everyone comes to the same discussion, but they will be able to have a rational discussion based on moral grounds instead of selfish agendas. And therefore, they would come to a resolution because it's more about what can we do for society and what's the best course forward and which practical approach is best, rather than, oh, what do I want for myself? So for example, an example here is that it would not look like let's ban racism because everyone thinks the exact same thing, but it would rather be what is the best way to solve racism? And everyone would abide by that under the premise that they are the most rational version of themselves. And we tell that there are many major changes that would happen on this note. So for example, poverty alleviation could happen, right? So in the government, all citizens and government officials, when they are elected, they would actually have to take this pill as well. So they would not have lobbying, bribery, corruption that will define their legacy as a politician, but rather they would actually be acting in the best interest of the citizens, right? And we also tell you that even these debates will be more fruitful because it's about how we can maximize the standard of living. So for example, the conflict between Democrats and Republicans wouldn't necessarily exist because it's less about just you're bad and you're bad. It's more about what can we do to better the US and what can we do to better the world. And we also tell you that it's likely to find better solutions because when everyone's on a cooperative ground, everyone is rational and there's no emotional play that comes into it, a muddy decision. And we also tell you that because everyone has a common interest, it is much easier to find solutions, and it is also much easier to brainstorm these solutions, right? So for example, let's say on the status quo, on the problem of whether taxes should be raised on the rich. So in this society, because of the fact that the poor are the majority, and any kind of government would come to the conclusion that taxes should be raised and redistributed. So for rich people, they would be acting in the best interest of the people, right? So they would be willing to pay more taxes. So for example, then poverty alleviation would be so much easier. And also we tell you that even if this is not true, opposition says that government would not have this discussion. And we tell you that citizens have changed to the point where they can have better morals because of that change. It's much more likely that citizens will be altruistic and therefore this corrupted government will be voted out. And before, are there any POIs on the floor? 5, 4.
POI?
Yep.
Can you please elaborate why rich people will be more willing to pay your taxes? Because there was absolutely no mechanization on this right now.
So this is under the premise that rich people will take the pill under our stance, right? Because everyone will take the pill. And the pill under the definition is essentially something that makes you more moral and more altruistic. So the rich people would actually care more about the poor, and they will be willing to see that, oh, it's not just about me, it's not about my financial losses, but rather it's about what I can do for society. And if giving up some of my wealth and paying some more taxes means that I can actually create a better life for the poor, then I would be willing to do that because I'm altruistic under the moral enhancement drugs. So the impact here is that we tell you that with the understanding that all citizens would have the veil of ignorance and the government officials as well, and that if not, the citizens would act as a strong mechanism to ensure that the government eventually does via means such as coups and elections. We tell you that on our side, we are likely to gain the tool of practical resolution and be able to solve issues and pass policies in the best interest of the people. We tell you that since everyone takes the pill, it would be likely that the rich, the poor, the government officials, and everyone in society will be working to ensure that everyone has the best standard of living. No, thank you, it's out of order. For as many people as possible from an objective viewpoint. And we tell you that the better society is, the more happier people are. And people should be able to make rational choices. And therefore, we believe that the moral enhancement drugs and its development is incredibly beneficial. And therefore, I am so proud to propose.
All right, thank you very much, Prime Minister. Just a very quick reminder to also time the person that you intend to give POIs to, so you don't disturb them during protected time. All right, with that said, let's move on to the next speaker, and I call upon the Leader of Opposition.
Sorry for the out of time, and can we have 30 seconds, please?
Yep.
Okay, first I apologize for the delay. I'll get my stopwatch out and I'll start my speech. Personal pronouns will be he, him, and I'll take points of information verbally. All right. Assuming visibility and audibility, I'll start my speech in 3. Oh, sorry. I'll start my speech in 3, 2. Currently, the proposition is bringing up a utopian society where people will take drugs in order to remove conflicts. This is starting to sound awfully like the book Giver to me. Even though the motion does not say assuming feasibility, the proposition did not come up with a single explanation on how this is going to work and how they're going to go forward with their policy. Again, no mechanization throughout their whole speech. Our stance is that moral enhancing drugs are bad and we should not support their development and use because there are way more harms than good. Before moving on to my argumentation, I would like to move on to my rebuttals. First of all, they just all of a sudden came up with an assertion with a one-liner statement saying that rich people will be more willing to pay more taxes, but there was absolutely no mechanization or reasoning behind this. In fact, I also asked the speaker POY to get an answer to this question, yet she did not tell us, Judge, any type of mechanization or reasoning to tell us the motives and incentives for these rich people to actually pay more. Second of all, the proposition, the first speaker was contradicting herself because she said she's not going to touch individual autonomy, but yet the government is going up with a policy that will force people to take these drugs. Judges, do you really think this is individual autonomy when the government is making everyone take the pill? And yet there was also no mechanization of how this is going to be feasible. And if everyone's going to take these drugs, meaning this will take a huge amount of funding by the government, and yet this means more taxes for individuals, but there was no mechanization on how they're going to get all of these funds. And furthermore, when these pills run out, because of the dependency people originally had on these pills, the harms mentioned by the proposition will continue to go on. So really, I'll elaborate this more on my speech. So our criteria for this debate is who can provide better care to those who need to use moral improving drugs. As we delve into the arguments, we'll be drawing comparisons between a world where the motion happens and a world where it does not happen. Imagine a world where moral enhancement drugs are readily available and widely used. People will become dependent on these drugs, and these can lead to long-term consequences. Furthermore, we should consider the root causes of moral behavior and address those rather than using drugs to modify behavior only for the short term. We should be looking at the long-term government. Now let's move on to our first argument. My first argument is about the dependency on moral enhancing drugs. Moral enhancement drugs have the potential to create a dependency. Those who use the drugs may feel compelled to continue using them in order to maintain a certain level of moral behavior because they did not get to have a solution to the problem first of all, and they do this to get a sense to only make themselves feel like they're doing better. But really, are they becoming better? No, because this drugs is only for the short term. This could lead to a neglect of other important factors, such as personal reflection, therapy, and self-improvement. It forces that away. Additionally, if people become dependent on these drugs, they may struggle to function without them, which could result in a vicious cycle of dependency. As mentioned in my rebuttals, what will happen if these drugs all of a sudden run away because of the high demand for them, because the government is apparently forcing everyone to take these drugs, right? When these go away, the harms mentioned by the government will start happening all over again, unlike our side, because we're going to target doing therapy first with the funding that the government is going to use, because if we do therapy, we are targeting the root causes, and therefore there's no dependency on drugs, and people will actually improve as a human being. Now I'll go to the impacts of this first argument. The impact of dependency on moral enhancement drugs could be significant. People may become less self-sufficient and unable to make ethical decisions without the help of drugs. Again, being more drug dependent. This could lead to a decrease in personal autonomy, individual autonomy, and the ability to think critically about moral dilemmas. The proposition tried to frame it as if individual autonomy is kept. However, I've already mentioned that the proposition is clearly contradicting themselves in their own arguments. Ultimately, it can undermine the value of moral behavior as it will become less of a choice and more of an obligation to take this drug. Why is this going to happen? This is likely to happen because humans tend to look for easy solutions to complex problems. Again, the problem in our case is people not being morally right, and this easy solution is these drugs. But we're already seeing the status quo in our society that the easy solution is never a good long-term solution, and it's only beneficial for the short term. And when the short term is gone, then all of these problems will start arising again. moral enhancement drugs could offer a simple and quick solution to issues related to morality, but this is only a disguise. However, because it is important to consider the potential long-term consequences of relying solely on these drugs rather than addressing the root causes of immoral behavior. Now I'll move on to my second argument, which is about the refunds to refund the money to create a system to combat the actual root causes so it's beneficial for the long term for people. Rather than focusing on the development of moral enhancement drugs, we should be directing resources towards addressing the root causes of immoral behavior. This could involve investing in education, therapy, and other forms of personal growth and development, such as tackling what people feel as if they are being what they are having trouble at, right? Because this is far more beneficial than having a dependency on drugs, because we are actually combating the problems in the first place. Addressing the root causes of immoral behavior requires a multifaceted approach, something the proposition currently does not have. We need to consider the societal, economic, and psychological factors that contribute to immoral behavior. By investing in education, therapy, and other forms of personal growth and development, we can empower people to make ethical decisions based on their own values and beliefs. Investing in these areas can have significant impact on society. By addressing the root causes of immoral behavior, we can create a more ethical and just society. Additionally, we can empower individuals to make ethical decisions based on their own values and beliefs, rather than relying on external factors such as drugs, because again, we are combating the root problems. So this is likely to happen because addressing the root causes of immoral behavior is more effective and sustainable approach than relying solely on moral enhancement drugs. Furthermore, investing in education, therapy, and personal growth and development is a more ethical approach, and it empowers individuals to make ethical decisions based on their own values and beliefs. In the proposition's case, the funding is going to go more up and up and up, and eventually it's going to be such a big amount of money that it's just going to require so much tax. But in our case, we are using that same amount of funding to achieve so much more, and in our case, the funding is not going to get bigger, and in case it might be smaller. In conclusion, we should not support the development and use of moral enhancement drugs. Dependency on these drugs could lead to long-term consequences, and we should focus on addressing the root causes of immoral behavior instead. By investing in education, therapy, and personal growth and development, we can create a more ethical and just society that empowers individuals to make ethical decisions based on their own values and beliefs. On our side, if we were to take the same amount of funds and help people to get actual therapy with that money and combat root causes for a majority, the benefits mentioned by the proposition is mutually exclusive on our side as well. Furthermore, if the proposition tries to argue that poor people cannot get treatment, yes, they can, because on our side, we're using that funding in order to assist people that can get therapy in the first place. Comparatively, we're lowering the cost on achieving the same goal while posing a solution that's better, more realistic, unlike the utopian society the proposition is dreaming about right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Leader of Opposition. I would like to invite the next speaker, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Hi, am I visible and audible?
Yeah.
Thank you. Quickly, my preferred pronouns are she, her, and I will only take verbal POIs, and I will not look at the chat. With that, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Just the reasons that opposition is already obviously is clear. First of all, they failed to prove the effectivity of their therapy alternative. Just this is what has happened in the status quo. It's clearly failing, which means it's not going to work, and it's not going to have any of the benefits we have talked about. And secondly, before moving on, I like to clarify, right? We aren't going to actually make people happy, but we're going to make them altruistic so they can rationally find solutions that become more solution oriented. And without just going directly into roles, first let's talk about the dependency on drugs. They say that people are going to struggle to function without them, but this will not help them because they take them, and we have to say that this is feasible because funding, etc., are not an issue, as because we already told you that this is funding by the UN, so it's a cooperation between all the countries in the UN and all the governments of the country. So if these drugs are successful, there will be more. So we think that the points on funding and effects and CVS is not an issue, right? Over they talk about how our solution is not long-term, but it is long-term because everyone takes it and it can be continued. Rather, we think your solution is not long-term because it is simply impossible to change people's decisions. And I'll talk more about why their alternative fails from the get-go, right? And we think that the point on like dependency on moral enhancement drugs is not necessarily a bad thing. They never told us why that's so bad. We think that it's just because people just because like people actually just use these drugs, we think it doesn't mean that they're bad. Like bad. We think that the drugs that we're talking about are people that are drugs that make people a better person of themselves. It's not like we're going to make them a bad person and by any means. So we think that is totally justified. And never told us why that's so bad in the first place. And as we have already told you that we have to say this is infinite. There's no issue with like the drugs running out or anything. Additionally, they tell us that we think the alternative on therapy, the reason it does not work because although you can maybe change the mindset of criminals with therapy, you cannot change people's mindset. For example, you cannot change the greed of an individual to get to let's say get more money, right? We think that if a person is greedy, you cannot change that with therapy. That's not an ethical issue. That's simply a characteristic. But the reason we can actually change that is because we make people more altruistic. By that we mean that they will become a little more will become a little less will become less selfish. So they're likely to care less about I guess their profit and rather think more about the greater good of society. That's why these kind of characteristics are only able to be changed on our side of the house. And lastly, we think that the funding will be actually less on our side because we're just giving this drug like once and just multiple times, and it's not like a repetitive thing, but therapy is something that is repetitive and you cannot simply give therapy to every single person in society. So we think that in the first place their solution is and we think that the therapy point is very niche and only a few rich people can do this. And even if therapy is an alternative and funding goes into making it therapy, we think capitalist norms still exist in their world. So if therapy does not have drastic effects, governments and corporations have no incentive to invest into therapy anymore, so it would become niche once again. They also always talk about like the root cause of like being immoral, but they never talk about other factors. Right? They talk about this also like multi-facet approach, but we think this is better on our side because in the status quo, emotional when it happens, i.e. political debates often go into ad hominem, and based on Barack Obama, it's like part of the ISIS, etc. Right? And emotions actually play a bigger role than people think. If you're angry, you're irrational, obviously, right? Without moving on to extensions, they talk about how we don't have autonomy. We tell you that this is not true. Let's just look at people in general. How do you feel when you do something bad? You obviously feel guilty, right? And looking at the point on individual autonomy, this is not on our side for two main reasons. First, because it is just mad to be as happy. It doesn't impact your decisions. Because we're fine with. So we think that there's no issue with like we're not like totally changing an individual's opinion. Rather, it's just a difference. Are you happy or are you sad? Moreover, we are fine with infringing a little bit of human rights because there's one, and two, because they have nothing to lose, right? Just because side opposites never told us what's so bad about using these drugs, right? So we don't see why it's going to be so bad for us to use these more enhancement drugs. So we think it's worth trading off a little bit of human right or personal autonomy for the sake of a society where people care more about each other and have so much more benefits that were actually ignored by the previous speaker. And because everyone wants to become the people, the problem here is that society and its just trigger irrational emotional responses, and all we're doing is just getting rid of that. And we think individuals are also more likely to help another because for the individuals, one, they're actually kind all the time on our side, so they will not maybe fight with a friend, family, teachers, and have better relationships. Second, they may also make more rational decisions. For example, if there's a grandpa having a hard time crossing the street, the person would actually help him across. So we can see more kind actions in a more close-knit society and with less conflict. People are also more likely to take action for the betterment of others. They're likely to take more actions like donating or helping others. So we can see kind actions and more wealth distribution. And we think that this is obviously likely. Like the point on rich people they will obviously donate because they will feel kind because they're given this drug that makes people feel like more empathy on our side of the house, right? Because the rich people, we think that they're already rich, they obviously have no like financial issues, but we think that because they feel more empathetic for let's say people who are not as rich as them, it's likely that they will donate on our side. But because of the drug. And developing a point on how we have more diplomacy, which can help enhance international relations, there's a less chance of conflict in general, and thus there's more likely to have a compromise. Even if two countries have like a bad history, they'll still be likely to cooperate as they're in a good day. So we actually have more international cooperation, and there's a less chance of like war or any conflict between any country, including like trade war, proxy wars, etc., etc. And we think that ends will justify the means, even if the means are forced, which they actually aren't because it's for the best interest of the vast majority of people. We believe that the creation of a more beneficial and more wholesome society is totally worth it, and we are willing to take that trade-off. But that's our before I move on to our POI, 3, 2, 1.
All right, so your team comes up saying that rich people are just so empathetic that they're going to be spending their own money. So you're saying that because they took these drugs, they'll be empathetic. So are you saying that on your kid, you will be technically forcing these people to donate their money because of your drugs?
Right, we're not forcing anyone to donate money in the first place. I think you understand this wrong. People are taking the drug, which is like everyone in the world will be taking on people in like South Korea, USA, Nigeria, whatever, like whatever country. What we're saying is these rich people are more likely to donate because they feel the empathy from the drug, because that is a side effect of the drug. Now we're forcing everyone to donate. But I don't know how you understood that, but that's my answer to your PR. And I already said this in my previous extension. So with that, moving on to my third argument, how we have a more beneficial and moral society. Because the drug makes people kinder and feel more empathy, they're likely to make selfless decisions, so there's less greedy people. This means it's more likely that every action done by people is for the greater good of society. Look at corporations. Are they less profit driven? Instead of putting up high costs and competing with one another, they're making goods affordable for the poor and vulnerable. Think of citizens, and like they will think of citizens and care more about their peers. So instead, they will be keen to lower costs and make it more affordable for the poor, so they can actually have a better quality of life. And maybe the poor will not actually be able to have to be stuck in the vicious cycle of poverty, and rather they can actually afford goods and sustain a living. And also they will also be less greedy, so there will be less domination of a certain company in markets. So there will be more opportunities for startups and less chance of a monopoly in a market. So we can see more diversity within a market and a high propensity of startups being successful. Moreover, looking at services, doctors may decrease costs for healthcare as they're not as profit driven and want betterment for patients and the society. And because everything becomes a good, we think that there'll be like less inflation and other benefits coming as a result. And we can even see more international peace as there's less greed and no reason to fight, because the reason like USA trying to fight the trade war, for example, is because of the greed to get more political leverage. So people who are selfless and have more empathetic and more altruistic, this issue would cease to exist. But on this comparative opposition is a world where everyone asks for self-gain, and it's literally the status quo. And we think this cannot be changed with physical therapy. Thus, I'm so proud to propose. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, DPM. I'd like to invite the next speaker, the deputy leader of the opposition.
May I have 30 seconds?
Sure.
Okay, I'm assuming that I am both audible and visible. Yep, all right. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Proposition comes up here today to mention these things, but they didn't understand the flaws of what they're trying to say, right? Our first speaker is that clearly mentioned the flaws of this, but the only thing that second speaker ends up doing was repeating the same thing that the proposition case, and not rebutting this at all, right? They mentioned that funding isn't an issue because they'd be funded by the UN, but do you not realize that the UN is funded by member states? Countries that are in UN pay for this, right? Technically these funds are by country. So you saying that it's paid by the UN, unless the UN somehow has an infinite money printer that I didn't know about, technically it means that this type of funds will continue to be used up by these countries, right? But 2 points on this, right? Why is it so bad for countries to have this type of incredible amounts of funds being put up to type of drugs? But secondly, on why this causes more individuals to have immoral behavior, right? To start off with this first part is that when funds of countries go into these type of drugs and putting it into developing these drugs even more, sorry, this means that other socioeconomic factors like poverty, these other socioeconomic factors like toxic culture around them won't be considered as much, right? Because the funds of that will significantly decrease, since now they need to make more money, they need to put more money into trying to get these type of they need to pay for these type of drugs, right? This causes more individuals, more poor people to have immoral behavior, more individuals, poor people have the incentive to do these type of criminal activities because they do not have enough money, because the government itself is not providing this type of economic situation for these type of poor individuals, right? We can clearly see that them not focusing on socioeconomic factors only incentivizes more individuals to take these more immoral behaviors, right? So clearly them saying that funding is not an issue is a clear misunderstanding on their side, right? They also mentioned how if they take this drug, like rich people might be able to pay for this more money, right? This means that a huge tax will come from rich individuals, meaning that individuals that worked hard to become rich are only going to be ripped off even more, which is clearly unfair. And if they took, like they mentioned how a lot of the times they'll be taking drugs multiple times, like each time, meaning that technically it's saying that the drug has a certain time limit. So once they take the drug and after they're out of that drug and they find out that were taxed incredibly because technically on their mind they were the best moral self of themselves, knowing that they donated, then how willing are individuals to even like in a bit, how willing are individuals to take that drug again, right? Like technically, if they find out that they're taking these huge donation amounts because of their best moral self, let's say, and how willing are they to take this drug again, right? Additionally, they said that everyone will take it so that it's like beautiful, like there'd be no conflicts, be a beautiful world. But how willing are some individuals to take this? Some people might disagree with the ethical concerns of them being able to no longer consider their values. So some people might not be able to take this unless the government is forcing individuals to this. Like they said that they would not be forcing individuals. So technically, them saying that, and if they agree to the forcing individuals, technically they're not valuing individual autonomy and they're not valuing this, only further encourages the individuals to not take the drug after, right? All right, additionally, they mentioned how like dependency isn't bad, but I like to mention this a bit more on my third argument. But once dependency isn't, why dependency is so bad is once that drug disappears, how will they be able to change that reliability? Yes, POI.
POI?
Yeah.
Wealth redistribution or no?
Sorry?
Do you support wealth redistribution or no?
What do you mean? Like, wait, so you're saying welfare distribution, right? So you're saying that, like, yeah, we're supporting welfare distribution because we're taking the funds that would usually be used for the development of drugs to be put into economic factors compared to on your side where you're being funded to take these type of drugs. That means that year by year, the socioeconomic factors are not cited, meaning more people are incentivized to take these type of, like more people are incentivized to do these more immoral behaviors, meaning more and more like the country has to produce more and more drugs, continue to have to put more scientific resources into like developing these moral drugs, meaning that the more and more funds are putting into drugs to stop these individuals, and then once they run out of funds, then what is going to be so bad about this, right? I'm going to mention this a bit more on my third argument, but like I like to repeat, additionally, once it means that more and more individuals are going to be put into these type of funds, means that more and more individuals, we're going to slowly start running out of funds, and more people are incentivized to do these type of bad things, right? So moving on to our third argument about feasibility, right? Why is this so? Because like on our side, we have this type of education, we have like type of role models in society, we have therapy, most importantly, we are able to figure out the root causes, right? There are 4 ways on our side we can create feasibility compared to their side where they're only relied on these type of drugs. Sorry. And so what is an example of this? Like, why is it more likely that they will change in the first place, right? Because if we were like able to find these type of root causes of individuals, they would be able to mitigate the impacts they might have caused them to act immorally, right? For example, if we were to focus a bit more on economic factors like poverty, right? So they can think this way on these sides, right? On their side, they're going to force individuals, like they're going to make individuals take these type of drugs so that they do not like do these bad actions. But on our side, we'd be slowly taking, like, we'd be trying to solve the issue of poverty. We'd be trying to, in the long term, we'd try to be able to help them look at their situation the most positively in their way, meaning that they would stop them from acting immorally to the long term, right? Because once their mindset is changed, once they understand that what they're supposed to do is like it's not something they should be doing, then technically they're not going to act immorally for the rest of their lives. But on their side, they're going to continually take drugs, meaning that once that drug runs out, then they're not going to be the best moral self, meaning that when they're not their best moral self, it causes them to act immorally again, meaning that they need to take the drug again. Meaning that, so let's say this, right? So if the country continually pushes individuals, the country continually makes individuals take these drugs, and not focus on socioeconomic factors, there's a more increased population of individuals that need to take these drugs, right? Then eventually at one point, the country's fund is slowly going to run out. The fund of these pills are going to decrease, right? Meaning that the significant development of these type of pills itself, the significant amount of pills that are going to be generated are going to disappear. This means that individuals with a bad moral stance in their own right without the pill means that they need to improve by themselves, right? Without the dependency of the pill. This means that they're going to have to solve the same thing on our side, right? On our side, like they're going to have to do the same thing that we are doing right now, but just with less resources. Because technically on their side, individuals now need to somehow not be able to change immorally and without these type of pills, meaning that technically individuals without the less resources, right? To extend a bit more on this, what we're trying to say is that it further helps society because first of all, the thing about this is that once they don't have the pills, they need to think about the root causes of this type of immoral behavior, like the government themselves, because they need to be able to solve this without the dependency of the pill. This means that they will finally recognize the socioeconomic factors, let's say the values and norms of a given society, or the psychological and emotional issues of the individuals themselves, right? This means that the government will need to recognize this, which we are already doing on our side, without the dependency of the pills, and we will have more resources compared to them because they they already put so much money into making these pills, right? To summarize a bit, what we're trying to say is that on their side, once the funding runs out, once the country's funding runs out, and them haven't developed any socioeconomic factors and haven't had any solvency, on our side, at the very least, we were able to create this long term where individuals will no longer act immoral, but on their side, where individuals will now have to focus on these type of root causes after running out of these pills. Now they don't have the same resources that they may have had beforehand. For those reasons, we are very proud to.
Thank you very much. I would like now to invite the next speaker, the government whip.
Sorry. I will be beginning. Before that, I just want to note that I go by he, him pronouns, and also I will only be taking verbal POIs. So yes, please, nothing on the chat. Thank you. So yeah, I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judge, we tell you that if you had the ability to solve any issues that humanity had, just for the sake of taking a pill every single day, why would you not do it? I would definitely opt into this plan. And I tell you, Judge, you should as well. The main problem with opposition side in today's debate is that critical case law is that they continue to say that they will address the root causes, but their failure to actually understand is that you need this drug in order to address the root causes. This is what we tell you continuously, because the problem is that with society is that society does not have no innovation. Society does not have enough education. Society does not have any of these problems where they cannot find solutions. The problem is that we have solutions, but we have greed. We have greed within our government. We have greed within our privileged class. We have greed, and we have the problem where poor people do not have enough power to actually make any kind of change. They have to get into unions and all of these things, and even then, the propensity of that is quite low. The same thing exists for any kind of other kind of advocacy, right? It's a very hard for policy to pass in society because of the fact there's lobbying, there's bribery, there's all of these different changes, right? So what we tell you is that all we need to simply do is we need to show that the ends justify the means by showing that we would actually better address not only these root causes, but there's also propensity, and that even at the sake of autonomy, we would still create a better world, right? But first of all, I also want to just punish opposition. The main thing that they focus on and continually is making individuals make moral decisions. But what I want to tell you is that we are not talking about individuals making more moral decisions. So although, yes, we did mention that individuals maybe would get into less fights, there'd be less crime, etc., right? But we also told you this is a failure to understand our case. And now why is this? We told you that people as a whole would be doing this. So this is about a collective decision by a society. We are telling you that not only are we going to have less fights, less person-to-person conflicts, but because everyone in society is not going to have greed, everyone in society is going to be selfless, we're going to come to better selfless decisions as a collective group. And that means our governments are able to make better policy, more easy policy, as well as this policy will not also effectively pass more easily, but also these political decisions would be selfless decisions which actually benefit the people, and for that reason, they would address the root causes. This is the main logic behind our case. They continually say there's no mechanization. That is the main reason. First of all, again, we are forcing individuals, but it is not a drug which induces fake happiness or forces people to take an action. It's about the change in mindset away from greed, away from selfishness to selflessness, right? So just again, to re-explain the mechanism, it would be a UN body approved by the UN scientific method scrutinized, and we told you that funding really isn't an issue because we show to you how already a lot of governments use their budgets on like funding militaries and etc. There is definitely enough money. If corporations can do it, corporations can produce drugs which they ship around the world. Why can governments not do it? And even so, if POI later, I'll be taking it later. For example, Annie already tells you this, but staying on this, we also tell you that member states are likely to invest in this because of 2 reasons. First of all, government officials also take this drug, which means that they are acting in the best interest of the world. Because MEDs are effective in changing society and generating wholesome discussion, they are likely to keep investing. And again, we have the fiat of this. This was already clarified at the start of the debate. B, the main factor why governments don't invest in things that help the world in general, other countries, equals greed, right? Greed can be fixed on our side because MEDs make people altruistic. The socioeconomic factors are fixed. People are altruistic and want to donate. But we tell you that therapy will not fix greed because greed is a very common emotion, right? Greed cannot be solved on their side. But we tell you that also the funding would continue for this, and there wouldn't be backlash against this, because if everyone understands this is the main driver which is actually giving us the ability to make solutions, then they would understand that we need to continue funding this. We need to continue funding the government. And even if governments act out of self-interest, people are altruistic and want progressive change for the country, and they actually want their needs met, and the government wants to cater to the citizens. Therefore, because the MED is effective, countries still have an incentive to invest in MEDs. The importance is that the entire point on the dependency on drugs is based on the premise that these drugs are going to run out of funds. Through this later analysis, we show you that a world in which these MEDs MDs disappear is very unlikely, so that case falls. We can use taxes, we can force companies to make them, we can lower the prices, we can do whatever we need, right? But we tell you that this can actually happen, and governments will definitely do this. Now, we have the fiat to say that propensity exists, that this has already been clarified by adjudicator and the help desk. So now moving to actual clashes, but the impact of this means that, yes, we can say the rich, government, the people will all be that empathetic, compassionate, altruistic, etc. They will actually take the action we want. We have that propensity to do so. So now, first of all, on clash number one, I'll be presenting 3 different clashes. First of all, on the least important clash in today's debate, which side creates a better world, right? So they said that therapy and investment into the root causes would be the best way, the most feasible way actually to solve this, right? We told you this was weakness. We told you that on their side, the feasibility for this would be much lower. For example, trying to look at for the root causes requires everyone to be committed. As we stated on our side, because everyone is altruistic, our political leaders' debates will not be caught up in the simple frameworks of questions such as whether or not climate change actually, but rather a question of how to solve climate change, balancing the different needs of different actors, etc., in the climate change debate, and having a much more specific, practical debate, right? Therapy is extremely expensive as well. So in the second point, therapy is extremely expensive, and also therapy doesn't address root causes either, right? Therapy just simply asks individuals to self-explore, etc., and the status quo does not involve the induction of patients into advocacy to change society, and thus is useful kind of changing society, right? Even political education, which is subsidized and funded, is not enough because we tell you that it doesn't matter with education if you only want what is best for yourself. If you have a bunch of Harvard graduates, it doesn't really matter because rich people, privileged majority ethnic groups, the people who have power have greed in our society, and you need to fix that greed. I'll be taking POI now. Seeing none, I'll be continuing. So first of all, on what we said, right, on this clash. First of all, they tried to defeat us on what we specifically said on this pill, right? They tried to defeat us with this running out and that would be expensive and etc. First of all, we're willing to accept the idea that would be expensive and simply redistribute funds, as we told you, that this would make people more solution oriented and would be important. Governments spend billions of dollars on the military, etc. And even if the government can't actually raise enough taxes, like they would raise taxes too high and still wouldn't work, then they can force companies to support this, raise taxes, etc. This is a very weak contribution. On our second point, on what they actually tried to, tell us that there will be a lack of ability to choose and there'll be too much dependence. First of all, they said that people would be overly dependent on these drugs, but we tell you that this is fine, as it is not the same as making bad decisions. These MEDs induce users to make altruistic choices, and thus it is not that bad. This addiction is not badly characterized. Even if they state that there are harms to dependency, we already preempted health harms through the scientific method and the UN monitoring, which we already mentioned, so this is out of debate from the get-go. Because of this, we have more feasibility to actually solve these issues. So clash 2, ability to find effective solutions as a society. They said addressing the root causes and that government would be diverting money away from the poor, right? First of all, in layer 1, we would be addressing the root causes as we explained. You need to fix greed in order to address the root causes. There's not a problem with innovation. There's not a problem with the fact that there are not enough social welfare systems or enough solutions or policies or bills or whatever. It is the fact that people are blocking it because they have greed and they have power. Layer 2, taking money away from the poor. They specifically said we would take money away from the poor, but we said because we are altruistic, actually, if you use the veil of ignorance, we tell you that when you likely evaluate this, we would actually probably just raise taxes on the rich. They said this would be immoral, but this is out of the realm of today's debate. Governments always raise taxes. They would be saying, oh, why are you taking money away from the rich? We tell you, governments always raise taxes. We are willing to take this trade-off because in the end, you're helping 99% of the population at the expense of the 1% of rich people who use it for yachts and etc. We said better policies. We would have better policies because we have better voters, better government officials, better debates because they're all altruistic, right? This was strong because A, there would be larger social change on our side and there was really no rebuttal to this except the propensity debate, which we already solved. But B, we told you it would be very easy to do as we do have the fiat to actually say this would happen. And even if for example, some government officials didn't take the pill, etc., we can enforce this via voters actually voting government out, coups, etc. Right? So what is the most important question in today's debate? It's really that on autonomy versus utilitarianism, right? They said the only actual response that remains in this debate is losing autonomy. And we specifically tell you that even though we have autonomy, yes, we are not actually losing autonomy to the same extent that they believe so, because we are simply just asking people to become more solution-oriented, to become more altruistic, to become more selfless, and stop with the greed. We are willing to make that trade-off because in the end of the day, we help all citizens, or at least most citizens. We help the most vulnerable. And because of this, we believe that everyone wants to become a good person. Everyone wants a good society. And because of this, we believe this is the most important class. We're willing to trade off autonomy. We will take this debate. Thank you.
Can I have 30 seconds, please?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. So we believe that the other side has debated about the wrong thing. They have stated this extreme policy of firstly forcing everyone in the world to take the pill, and this debate seems like it has turned into a debate about capitalism and communism, right? They've said that they're going to sacrifice all the rich people, which firstly isn't a feasible option in the first place, and there's a reason why communism doesn't work. Right? Okay. I'll now get to the rebuttals. So firstly, they've said that they're like forcing these people to take these pills, and it's okay because it's just help making them be like selfless and stuff, right? Firstly, we believe that some people don't agree to the ethics of getting forced to take these pills, and they believe that just forcing yourself to be, I guess, morally right is incorrect. So we believe that this also does not stand. And moving on to more important rebuttal, they have said that like they're going to force all of these like rich people to give up all of their money in order for the sense of poor is like the a sense of poor is like the majority, right? So we believe that this isn't a long and sustainable option because firstly, when like the rich give like the money give money to the government in the first place, and all of their money since a large amount, we believe that this money will slowly keep draining out. We believe that this money is going to keep isn't going to be permanent, and the money will keep draining out until they have actually no more money to actually keep funding, I guess, these pills, right? So I'll explain why this is a problem in my later classes, but now I'll take the POI.
So specifically, because we specifically told you the impact of how the majority of people already support very specific policies to support themselves, and it's just that greed and like bribery and lobbying is stopping this. Why is our policy bad if we actually?
Okay, so you guys said that people are just going to, these rich people are going to agree to, I guess, getting all of their money taken away in the first place, which isn't true, which I'll get to right now, right? So. Okay, which I'll get to in my classes. So firstly, about feasibility and cost efficiency. I have 3 levels of analysis. Firstly, the feasibility of their case. They mentioned that from the get-go, their policy is to appease everyone by giving every single person in the world the pills, right? Firstly, the entire population will have to constantly take and rely on these pills. Secondly, it has to literally last forever until everyone's literally dead. And these pills also need to go through like these safety checks and needs to be 100% safe if you want to force them, like the other side has said, right? Firstly, we can just from all of these reasonings, like we don't even need mechanization to prove why this is going to be unsustainable in the first place. The amount of money that this is going to take probably just equals to that of like all of the money like the rich people have combined, right? I'll now go to the second level analysis. They mentioned that these rich people will consent to getting their money taken away because everyone is going to like be empathetic and they want to like save other people. We believe that this is just not true because if this is true, then why would rich people? Because firstly, why would rich people right now not donate every single penny to the poor in the first place, right? If we believe that the rich are so sympathetic that they want to do a good cause for literally everything and get all of their money taken away in return, then they would have just donated all of their money to the charity in the first place. Secondly, we believe that the rich has no incentive to give their money that they worked really hard for, and that they are like helping, that they're improving their own life with. And thirdly, we believe that by taking all of the richest money away, the economy of certain like companies and countries in the first place will decrease in the first place because the rich people actually run these companies that actually sustain that keep the economy sustainable in the first place. Third level of analysis. They said that you don't need to force the rich to play. This is a direct contradiction in the first place because like the third we can also see the contradiction in this, right? The first speaker said that like the UN will provide it. Second speaker said that like I guess they'll like force these people, they'll like give them the option to do it. Third speaker said that they were going to force these people to do it. Like we don't get their characterization in the first place, but even if we do, we believe that like our case of having like I guess like actual moral support instead of completely relying on these pills is better in every single aspect, which moves on to my second class, right? Which side gives a better moral support towards everyone in the end, right? Their side has dependency on pills, and we will have their side will have just like these honeymoon for a couple of years. They'll be like they'll be happy for a couple of years, but they have no response to the fact that like the funds will run out in the end if we just take out all the money in the first place, right? We believe we know there are drastic harms of this. This causes the conflicts in country, meaning even if they build like a great society with all like it'll all just crumbling down. Like what our last speaker said, right? When there's like lack of funds and we have to decrease the amount of funds for I guess like these pills, we're going to need to like slowly decrease the I guess like how frequently people use these, right? So we believe that since there's a dependency on these pills, since they don't have actual moral support, since they don't have like they aren't completely rehabilitated and they aren't ready to like keep like functioning in society without these pills, just drastically lowering every time like the amount of pills is just going to lead to like more unrest and like people just not being able to function without this. And believe that, and comparatively, we've seen therapy working. We've also mechanized and characterized what therapy in our world will look like and what moral support in our world will look like. I'll take that POI.
So even though, fine, you might talk about all of these different harms, like these health harms and etc., but the info slide has already shown that there is propensity for it. So other than that fiat, can you try and take this debate to the even if level, please?
Firstly, we don't see this motion being a motion about even if there's feasibility. So we believe that we have no need to address this. Okay, in conclusion, so let's compare and weigh all of the cases that happen in this debate, right? Firstly, their argument about feasibility just does not work in the first place, which means that their case does not make any sense. It's never going to happen in the first place because the rich aren't willing to like give all of their money away for no particular reason other than empathy, right? Okay. Secondly, we believe that we have a more sustainable solution to the problem of mental health because in this case people won't have to completely be reliant on it. Therefore, we can use our options like therapy, which we've clearly mechanized and we've clearly explained how this wins us this debate. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Opposition Whip. I would like to now invite the opposition reply.
We'll just need 20 seconds, please.
Yeah.
Sorry so much for the delay. I'll be delivering our last speech. All right, I'll start speech in 3, 2, 1. Honorable judges, even after giving the opposition a chance to actually engage, they still didn't engage on any of our points. Judge, throughout this whole debate, the opposition didn't engage in any of our points. They were debating in their own world and completely disregarded everything we said as a team. In my 4-minute speech, I will give you multiple pieces of content. I will first criticize the proposition's case, and I'll do a best case and worst case comparison of this debate. I'm disappointed to see that the proposition came up to the podium and absolutely disrupted the flow of this debate and made it very messy. So I will organize this debate for you. So first of all, judges, did you notice how repetitive their whole case was? Their whole case was talking about this altruistic utopian world. Judge, I hope you don't buy this. They assume the feasibility of how drugs work. But on top of that, they assume that they have this infinite amount of money to produce these drugs. Did the government even say a word on how they're going to gain this funding? Did they explain how they're going to incentivize people to do these funds? No. They said that one-liner claiming that rich people will pay and the UN will fund it. But where are the damn incentives? Why would these people be willing to pay? There's a scene throughout their whole case, and their whole case lacked complete mechanism and was very infeasible. Not only this, their first and second and third speaker all completely contradicted each other. The first speaker came up to the podium and mentioned that the United Nations will do it. The second speaker came up and said that rich people will do it. And the third speaker came up saying both will do it and both are going to be forced to do it. Really, please choose a side. Judges, did you also notice how there was absolutely no engagement on any of our points and how we should refund these funds used? Our first speaker gave 3 minutes of his speech time to actually care about the citizen individual autonomy and bodies, unlike the proposition. Did the proposition just not listen to our first speaker at all? I think I have an understanding as to why they did not respond. It's because at this part of the debate, both sides know that refunding gains all the benefits mentioned by the proposition sides because it's mutually exclusive, while being more cost-effective and achieving better outcomes. This is a feasible solution that combats root causes and is better for the long term. Judges, you all have to read the book Giver once in your lives, right? It's one of the most fictional and infeasible worlds in this whole world. To those who haven't read the book, let me quickly summarize. People in that world eat pills, like in this debate, in order to remove colors, emotions, and also encourage to do empathy and good behavior. I mean, first off, it's very infeasible, but in the book, people literally found a loophole and still it was revoked. If this was shown in the infeasible in a fiction book that pills does not work, how much more do you think it will be infeasible in our current world that is not fictional? But last but not least, the opposition lacked complete engagement talking about the dependency on drugs that we mentioned. They failed to give one well-structured rebuttal for the past 21 minutes of their speeches. Why? Because it is true, dependency will happen because individuals have to constantly eat this drug in order to feel better. Again, no mechanization on how they will feel better, unlike us. But on top of that, they failed to engage out our point and asking them, because we also asked them, what happened to drugs right now? But they still did not engage on this. Their best case, no conflicts happen, rich and poor will be able to support it, and country will develop and work together. Again, unrealistic and utopian. Judges, they accepted to the fact that having an addiction and dependency to pills is going to happen. This means that country will put most of their funds into pills, socioeconomic factors won't be considered. This means that more people will be incentivized to do immoral behaviors. This means countries need to spend even more money. They do not provide pills until the end of time, and that is highly unlikely. This means at one point, they won't be using it to pills, and all these harms that was mentioned by both the proposition and opposition will come out all again, unlike our case. In our case, people will be solving this because we are targeting their key problems. And again, since the proposition lacked complete mechanism, this point should be bought by you judges. What is the problem of this? Individuals will have immoral behaviors as the pills are the only way they're going to be able to have good moral behaviors. This means more conflicts. And since the funding goes to pills, poverty, and other government things that governments have to pay for will not be possible. Judges, the whole proposition case is number 1, extremely repetitive, number 2, extremely infeasible, and number 3, one line and very forceful. All of our speakers mentioned that their case is very forceful towards the rich and the UN, and they simply assumed this by saying that people will be sympathetic. The only one thing they mentioned, but this was rebutted by us successfully in literally 5 seconds. Like how their world would crumble down, judges, the proposition case right now is also crumbling down, and for all these reasons, we should take this debate home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, opposition reply. I would now like to invite the final speaker of the round, government reply.
Hi, am I visible and audible?
Yep.
Thank you. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Just the issue with, we think that the reason Jonas wanted to stop taking the medication in the Giver was because he was denied memories of the best things in the past. Freedom to love who they love and ability to know the past and etc. Not because, and this was, he didn't leave because he had to take some kind of pill. Let's be clear, the Giver is not the same. And in the Giver, people are made happy and do not get autonomy. In our world, people are happy, they're altruistic. First, on propensity, it has been clarified time and time again that these pills have propensity. It has been clarified by the adjudicator in Slack, as in this debate assumes that it is possible. This means yes, these rich people will consent because they're altruistic and look at society from the veil of ignorance. Regarding health harms, we tell you because the propensity exists. It means that what the info slide has stated will happen. This means that the only effects of these meds will be altruistic, compassionate, and make people selfless and empathetic. We told you that if they don't have the drug, they won't be addicted necessarily, but even more these drugs are needed. Again, the fiat of that is in the help desk, and thus assumes that the drug will do the effects in the info side has that stated. And we think that the debate is on two metrics: one, which side has better individuals; two, which side has a better society. At this point, it's pretty clear that government wins the debate. But just to clarify model, because there's been so much confusion over that from side opposition. First, funding will be through the UN and the governments of the member states, if necessary, the IMF and other international bodies too. And this will be make sure that every citizen takes the drug, and there will be checks by UN officials. And they said there was a contradiction, but no, yeah. And member states would also raise taxes and then fund the UN together. The reason money is infinite is because there's something called economy, and then there's income and outcome and GDP levels, which means there's a gross domestic product each year, so each country gets money, which can be used for this pill. Yeah. And two people will take the drug forever. So if the drug is set to run out on, let's say, like April 30th, the person will take the drug given by the government on the day before. So there's no period where the drug is not in effect. Also, this the S debate, which is a representative of society. So we have the fiat to ignore this anyways. We don't need to provide the funding will happen in the first place, but rather why we as a society should advocate for this. And this is an advocacy debate. Therefore, the more contentious issue is not whether we can get funding in the first place, but possibly only whether this is sustainable into the future, which we showed because society, if once altruistic, would continue. Let's look at first got into the therapy vs pill. The major here is that they said that therapy can allow personal development and is more effective. But this was because there's therapy in the status quo and is clearly failing, and there are greedy people and people who make bad decisions. Our response is that the therapy is only affordable for the rich and is denied to the majority of society, including the poor. And even if people were given therapy, it is ineffective because A, it is not always effective for even for like rational decision, but B, it does not fix greed, and greed is the biggest factor that make people put like high cost for, let's say, food or even start a conflict to get a larger border, etc. So they don't solve the problem in the status quo at all. But we said that people will actually become more moral, and this is strong because it's pretty self-explanatory as the moral gives us fiat to assume this pill is feasible and can be made, and the effects of it was pretty clear. The response that this is not feasible as the pill will run out, but this pill because we told you this funding is from the UN and it's presumed it will be infinite because there's an increase of capital from the economy, so it will never run out. Moreover, they said this is an infringement of the right to autonomy, but it's not true because A, it is a mad vs happy person, and also because it is worth the trade-off to fix every problem in the society, like poverty, climate change, war, etc. If you could live in a world of peace without one drug, who wouldn't take it? Now, we think it's clear opposition makes no change at the end of the day because therapy is niche regardless of how much funding opposition pours, and it does ineffective. And on the comparative, we tell you that because therapy is effective, government must actually allocate more of the budget, so there will be like other budgets coming further. And we also continue to talk the rich have an incentive to do so, but because they take MMDC and they become altruistic. And then secondly, they said that we don't tackle the root cause of people who will become addicted to the drug, but this is because they never proved to us why this addiction is so bad. And also that they don't tackle the root cause because therapy doesn't fix greed, and so they have no effectivity. And greed drives people to act for profit and self-gain. We said that we have better resolution of conflicts. This one strong because this is debate winning, as having international peace with a drug is wholly feasible and effective. For example, under our society, the Russian-Ukraine war would have never happened in the first place. And look at societal benefits. They never told us any exclusive benefits they gained through their policies, so that drop. But we said that we solve social issues such as poverty, and this was strong because this deals with opposition points saying that we're wasting money, and instead we can use it for things like social welfare. The responsible was that just on how this is not feasible, we told you why individuals are going to donate because of the motive, and which is because we again have to show they will become altruistic simply per the definition of MEDs that's clarified on both slides, which means that makes people more empathetic, altruistic, or compassionate. So we clearly took this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, government reply, and thank you all speakers for all of those wonderful speeches. Again, I'd like to congratulate all of you for making it to the finals, and good job, everyone. So the announcement will happen in the grand hall. So proceeding this, there's nothing else for everyone to do. You can just say thank you to each other and say nice things, and you can proceed to leave this room and then go to the main hall. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, judges.
Thank you.